Well, good morning, y'all. I can talk like that because I was born in Texas, so. But I didn't really grow up there that long. Just when I was 5, I moved. So, but yeah, good morning. Welcome to class 7. I'm going to be talking about the endocrine gland system. So this is exciting, and one of the things I've enjoyed learning the most about. Although I could probably say that about most all the things I've been learning, but this specifically is so super important and not something that I was that familiar with previously, and I don't think the medical doctors really talk about it that much, or how the glands work. They probably understand them to a certain function and they have to study them, but it's not talked about on a daily basis to their clients and helping them understand what's not functioning properly and how to restore function. Unfortunately, the medical industry is more into giving you a drug that's going to give you something that your body's not producing by itself, what actually hurts your body. Because anything that your body's supposed to produce on its own, a hormone, a steroid, if you give it to yourself synthetically, it's actually going to hurt your glands even more, because they're going to say, hey, well, I don't need to make any. So they're going to shut down even more. And so we're going to talk about what these glands do. I'm just going to give a brief overview of some of the main endocrine glands. I put some extra info in here for those of you that are more detailed. Some of the notes have been a little bit more general, so I'm not going to talk about everything in here probably, but if you want to go a little bit more in depth, I put a little bit more details on the glands and stuff so you can go back if you want to. I tend to like to know general how it works, and then practically what does that mean to me. But yeah, some more details in there that you can go to. So yeah, but God created these awesome glands and they all work together and do different things, and we're not meant to give ourselves something synthetic. Our body produces things and is supposed to produce things, and if we give it the right stuff, and herbs are one of the most powerful things to regenerate and enhance the endocrine gland function, like we're going to get into. So yeah, we can. Don't ever believe a doctor if he says, hey, your such and such gland is only functioning at 50% and it'll never restore, because that's false. It's just like any cell. If you restore health to that cell, if you give it the right things, if you remove obstructions, if you cleanse it, function comes back and it starts working fine again. So yeah, let's kind of get into some of these glands. But I've heard the endocrine gland system talked about being the most overlooked system in the whole body, because it's kind of like the master computer. It tells your body what to do, and it secretes hormones that cause action. And so if they're lacking, you got big problems going on, and it can lead to serious things. So I've also heard it talked about like the government of your body. So again, making the decisions, telling your body what to do. So if something's producing too much, too little, it's telling, it's out of balance. So welcome, y'all. Just in time, just getting rolling. Talking about the endocrine gland system. So yeah, again, it's talked about as the master computer, the government of our body, telling your body what to do. It's one of the most important things. And so basically, when it comes to glands, you have 2 basic kind of glands: endocrine glands, which are ductless glands, and they basically secrete hormones right into the bloodstream. They have immediate effects on the body. And then you have exocrine glands that actually secrete through a duct, like the salivary glands, where it's actually secreting something out of a duct. But we're mainly going to talk about the endocrine glands because those are the most powerful. And it's said by a lot of natural health practitioners and healers that I've studied and heard about that roughly, you can't pin it down, but about 75% of all disease symptoms can be attributed to the failure of endocrine glands. So that's a big deal. And the main endocrine glands being the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the thymus, thyroid, parathyroid, the testes, the ovaries, and the master gland, the pituitary. So we'll get into those. But yeah, and it's interesting, as I've studied under different people and heard practitioners that have been in the natural health industry and working with healing people for decades. One guy in particular that's been working with people for almost 40 years, he said, gosh, 10, 20, 30 years ago, you wouldn't see these issues in endocrine glands until it was like elderly people. But now, as time goes on, with our diet, with our lifestyles, with all the toxins, all the things we come up with, I mean, kids are having issues. Kids are being born with issues with their glands and weaknesses. This genetic, whatever you want to call it, genetic weaknesses being passed down, because if you're in a state of weakness and then you procreate, you're procreating that weakness into your next child. So it's serious stuff, and each generation is getting weaker and weaker. And you know, it's sad to see a kid being born and a 1-year-old being diagnosed with cancer or something. It's like he didn't even have a chance. He was born into it because of a weakness. So, but again, we can work on that stuff, and it can be brought back to health. But yeah, and I've heard it talked about with cancer too, where it used to, again, you wouldn't see it until the elderly people, and it would take, for a tumor to grow, it would take years and decades sometimes to grow a tumor. But with the amount of toxins and the lifestyles and the foods, people are growing tumors. You can grow them in months or less. So yeah, this taking care of our bodies is serious business. So let's get into the glands. And the first one, I start with the pituitary because it is considered the master gland. It's pretty interesting because, like I said, previous, I didn't know anything about the pituitary. I had maybe heard it once or twice in anatomy and physiology, but I don't remember much about it. But it is the most important gland because it basically tells the other glands what to do and how to function. And so if that one's out of balance, again, it's going to throw others into overactivity, underactivity. It tells the other glands how much of things to produce. And so yeah, it controls some of the functions of the other glands. So obviously that's a big deal. When that becomes weak, it can have a positive or negative effect on these other glands. And again, like I mentioned, I put a lot of details in here, so I'm not going to go through all of them because I got a lot of info. You could talk forever on the endocrine glands, but I'll go over some key points, and then I put some more details in here that you can go back and review on your own. So I'm going to move on to the pineal gland, which sits right kind of behind the eyebrows. It's a little gland back there that actually scientists don't know a ton about, honestly. But what we do know is that it synthesizes melatonin, which is really important for sleep, helps relax, and it's very affected by light. So when it has light, it inhibits the production of melatonin, and then when it doesn't have light, it produces melatonin. So that's what we do know, and that's a big deal today with people not being able to sleep very well. The gland's not functioning right, or you're giving your body, people are taking synthetic melatonin to go to sleep, and that might help you go to sleep, but what's it doing to your gland? It's forcing it to be weaker, because it's supposed to produce that on its own. So, but people are up late at night looking at their iPhones. Again, what is that doing? It's bringing light into the eyes, not causing you to secrete. So God designed us a certain way when the sun goes down. I'm not saying we should not have any light, but at some point you should be off your computers, be off your iPhone, and I'm guilty of this too myself sometimes. I have to tell myself, I got to put the phone down or get off this computer and relax and read and whatever. Because yeah, if you're sitting there on your iPhone until 11 p.m. and then want to go to sleep right away, it might not work. I don't know. Because again, once the light is removed, your body can start producing melatonin on its own. If it's strengthened enough, you may need to do some herbals and some detoxification to get it stronger too. So that's what we know about the pineal gland, thyroid and parathyroid. And probably the ones I'm going to focus on the most are the thyroid and the adrenal glands, because they're some of the most common ones that have issues. And so a lot of the herbs I get into are good for the whole endocrine gland system, but some of them are more specific for adrenals and thyroid and stuff like that. But so the thyroid sits right inside your neck, two little glands. The thyroid, the parathyroid are just small glands. There's about 4 of them on the back side of the thyroid, and they're really important. Some of the main things they work with is calcium utilization. So people with weak bones, you could be consuming enough calcium, but if your thyroid isn't working properly, you're not going to utilize that calcium properly. So you see people with bone loss, rigid fingernails, different things like that. That's one thing. Also, and energy metabolism. So Some people will gain a lot of weight because their thyroid isn't properly metabolizing foods. Also for your regulation of temperature in your body. So a lot of people will find most common is a weakened thyroid, not a overactive, but a weakened thyroid. So they're cold all the time, their hands and feet get cold all the time. And it's cool, once you start learning about the glands, you can start to pick out different issues based on symptoms. So yeah, somebody has brittle fingernails and weak bones and they're cold all the time, cold hands and feet, you probably got a weak thyroid. Same thing with adrenal glands. You can look at different things with that. If you have constant inflammation, anxiety, low energy, you probably have weak adrenal glands. So it's just interesting as you learn about these, you can kind of self-diagnose. We'll get to the end. You don't want to get too confused into what each one does and if one's weak, because you almost do the same thing no matter what's weak. You alkalize, you detox, you eat the foods that God created, and there are certain herbs you can take that are specific. But yeah, some other things the thyroid's good for. Again, metabolism, helping the cells absorb and use glucose, protein metabolism for growth, the use of fats. It regulates the heartbeat and how deep the respiration is, how deep you breathe. A lot of people nowadays are very shallow breathers, and we need to learn how to breathe deeper, get that oxygen in. It's one of the most important things we need is oxygen, so breathe deeper sometimes. So many people consume cooked dairy products and refined sugars that there's something that's really big on anything, but especially the thyroid gets congested with mucus and this, and that can easily cause it to be underactive. So some other symptoms of hypothyroidism, low thyroid function. Again, bone loss, improper bone growth, brittle, rigid fingernails, hair loss, cold hands and feet, a dislike for cold weather, heart arrhythmias, heart attack, depression, connective tissue weakness as well. Scoliosis, again related to the weakness of the bones, arthritis, fatigue, slow metabolism, obesity, hot flashes. Yeah, and so that's the most common is the underactive thyroid. You do occasionally have overactive. That can basically come out as goiters, protruding eyes, hyperactivity, thyrotoxosis, and excessive growth issues, but you don't come up with overactive as much as underactive. But yeah, the biggest things I know about is the temperature, the metabolism, and calcium utilization. So going on to thymus. The thymus is considered the master gland of the immune system. So it regulates a lot of things with the immune system, specifically creation and maturation of these specific cells called T cells. And again, when you get into the immune system, I'll have a whole class on the immune system. There's all sorts of crazy different cells that are a part of it, but the T cells are a kind of white blood cell. They're part of a class of immune cells called NK, natural killer cells. So yeah, I put a little note in here just to, again, I like to think about it practically, but they're like the Marine and the Navy SEALs of the body. So they're the first kind of responders to go in and attack foreign invaders, pathogens in the body. So it's important that they be functioning good, because that's an important part of, we encounter bacteria, fungus, stuff all the time, and we shouldn't be afraid of that if our systems are functioning properly. And then the adrenal glands. I got a lot of info on the adrenal glands because they're probably, arguably, some of the most important glands in the body for a lot of reasons. And I did talk about them in my first class on anxiety because of how important they are related to anxiety. But yeah, first they produce neurotransmitters which are essential to brain and nerve function. So yeah, people get foggy brain, anxieties because their neurotransmitters aren't working properly, and they're producing maybe too much or too little of certain adrenaline and stuff like that, or they're always in that fight or flight mode. They can't turn off the adrenal glands. That's another thing. But some of the other stuff that the adrenal glands are really important for is producing steroids, corticosteroids, which help buffer inflammation. So they're anti-inflammatory compounds. So anytime that you have rampant inflammation in the body, your adrenal glands are very important for producing steroids to put out that fire, that inflammation. And so if you got inflammation going all over the place and your adrenals aren't functioning right, you're in bad news. I likened it in one class to, you got a house that's raging on fire and the fire department is out on vacation. They're nowhere to be found. That inflammation, that house is going to be burning and nothing to put it out. So you can take synthetic steroids, but then again, what is that going to do? And that may be necessary in some cases of really bad inflammation, maybe a little bit of that. But I caution people with doing that because what's that going to do? It's going to weaken the adrenals. So the other side of that is, what can you do to increase function of the adrenals, make them start producing those steroids on their own? And you can also buffer that inflammation, because inflammation and acidosis basically go hand in hand. The more acid, the more inflammation. So you can really quickly start drinking alkaline water, eating foods that are alkaline forming, fruits and vegetables, and that's going to help buffer the acid and bring balance. So all of the steroid type hormones are synthesized from cholesterol, and I'm not going to get in too much to the whole cholesterol thing, but the body does use cholesterol as an anti-inflammatory agent too, if it can't produce enough of the hormones to do it. But yeah, again, acid diet, mucus forming foods, it's messing up the adrenal glands, and all the artificial stimulation, coffee, soda, alcohol, energy drinks. You're artificially stimulating your body to do something that your adrenal glands are supposed to do on their own. They're supposed to give you energy naturally. So if they're functioning high, you won't need to take coffee. You know, I used to own a moving company, and sometimes you're working long hours, and I would get energy drinks, and sometimes need it in the morning, or I'm not a big coffee drinker, but it was amazing when I stopped all the artificial stimulants. I started eating better. My body started producing. Now I don't need anything. I can sometimes we'll just wake up early full of energy, not need any artificial stimulants. And that's the way the body's supposed to work. You're not supposed to need to artificially stimulate something. When you need the energy, your body will produce it on its own if you're getting adequate sleep and adequate nutrition. So another big thing with adrenal glands is it affects blood pressure. And if your blood pressure isn't high enough, this causes a ton of bad things. You're not getting enough oxygen, nutrients to the body, to the cells. It's not affecting the lymphatic system, because if your blood pressure is low, it's not putting as much pressure on the lymphatic system, causing that to back up. So it's pretty much a telltale sign of weak adrenals if you have low blood pressure. And I've kind of categorized that based on one of my textbooks here. So low blood pressure being top number under 118 is usually always an indicator of adrenal weakness. I put, again, from my textbook, a healthy blood pressure is usually 120 to 130. Systolic is the top number, over 60 to 70 diastolic. So if you're under that, it's pretty much a guarantee you have weak adrenals at some level. And I put some other symptoms in here of what weak adrenals could be. And then go under the pancreas, another important endocrine gland. It's also an exocrine gland. It does both. So in that it produces hormone insulin that's secreted directly into the bloodstream, but it also produces other enzymes that are secreted for digestion and stuff like that. So yeah, it increases blood glucose levels by stimulating the liver to convert stored glycogen to glucose. It secretes insulin, which is like the shuttle for sugars into the cells and getting them out of the bloodstream. So there's a lot of people with not producing enough insulin or just issues with that related to diabetes. And again, the pancreas can be restored and regenerated and rejuvenated. And people, I've heard several people talk about how diabetes is an easy fix if you detox and regenerate the body and use herbs. So, like I said, it's like all the cells are the same in the fact that when they get congested, when they get toxicity, when they're not getting the right things, they become weakened. And then wherever that weakness is in the body, it forms as a disease, if you want to call it. And again, you restore function, you remove the impending toxins, and you give it back what it needs, function comes back. So it's not a mystery to be had. The ovaries are obviously in females, and They serve two main functions. One is to produce the reproductive cells, the eggs, if you will, and the other is to produce hormones. So, yeah, there's a lot that could be gone into with that, but some of the main issues with that is it getting out of balance and producing too much estrogen and then not enough progesterone. Estrogen is very acid forming. It causes change, and we need that at sometimes. Women need that to create their cycles to change, but what happens if you don't have the other in the right balance? Women have issues with their cycles, and it can be very uncomfortable. And yeah, it's very acidic too. So again, you get cystitis, fibroids, all this cancer of the uterus, gross. It's usually a over-acidity because the estrogen, too much estrogen and not enough buffering is causing damage to cells, and it's causing issues. So you need progesterone, and the adrenals are actually important for producing progesterone, and you need it in the right balance at the right time. So if the adrenals are weak, you're going to be raging in estrogen, and that's why women are always hot, because acids are hot. They're having issues, uncomfortable, issues with their cycles. So that's a big deal with that. But yeah, a lot of info in there about that I'm not going to go into all the way. I'm doing a class later on women's health. Yeah, so that'll be interesting. I'll be doing one on male health too. But yeah, moving on to the men, the testes. It's the men's reproductive organs and an important endocrine gland. So they produce the male sperm, but also produce testosterone, and another one that I didn't know that much about, inhibin. So testosterone is also very acidic. It causes change, and again, it's very needed. But if us men don't have the right things in balance, it can cause issues too, and sometimes too much testosterone and not enough balance can lead to prostate cancer, inflamed prostates, as well as a lot of other things. But yeah, testosterone is always, men always want more testosterone because of its muscle building, its energy, it's kind of the aggressive, literally in the body and makes you more aggressive. And so some men are on the weak side of that, and especially a lot of older men, but a lot of times it could be too much and out of balance also. So bringing balance is the key, not just increasing or decreasing, but giving yourself. That's why I love whole foods and things that God created, because they don't ever force a specific action. They bring balance. So you take a synthetic, like they may put a woman on progesterone. It's going to cause your adrenals to become weak, and but then it's going to throw other things out of balance potentially too, because you're giving it to your body and your body's not producing it. But you strengthen the endocrine glands, boom, brings balance, everything works itself out. So, and again, that's all I'm going to really get into on the endocrine glands. You guys can study more. I put some more notes in there, and I was just giving the touch points in my notes too. There's a million different things you could learn about and all the different functions, but I hit on the key ones. But never when I'm learning and when anybody's learning about these glands and their functions, should we get too caught up in, this one gland, and what do I need to do about that? And, look at it from the medical perspective of treating that thing, but look at the body as a whole. And if you treat the body as a whole, and the key is always, no matter what gland's weak, no matter what's going on in the body, you always alkalize, you always detox, you eat the foods that God created in the way that He created them, because that's going to restore health. And then there are some specific herbs that you can take to work on those specific things. But some people get all freaked out and bent out of shape about one issue and worry about it. But it's almost the same thing in every single case, except for, like I said, the herbs and a couple of specific things. If something's really out of balance, you may need to do a little bit of intervention. But most of the time, you can just alkalize, detox, eat good food, and add some herbs. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time, some months or whatever, but function comes back. And that's the healthiest way to do it. So yeah, let's get into these herbs. So of course, I love herbs. And again, these are just I don't know, about 16 different herbs that are some of the best ones for the endocrine glands. But we could go all day on herbs that are good for the endocrine glands. But these are kind of the snapshots of the most important ones. So starting with alfalfa. I love alfalfa. It's called the king of herbs, and I've heard it called king of foods too, and different things because it's so nutritionally dense. It's crazy. They talk about the roots of the alfalfa plant can go as far as 60, and I've even heard some people say 80 to 120 feet into the ground. Whatever the number is, they go super deep into the ground, so they're able to absorb way more minerals, vitamins, stuff out of the earth than other foods. Anything like that I've talked about in another class, anything that has a big root system is going to be a strong, it's going to be a strong herb. It's going to be a strong plant. I was talking about dandelion. Dandelion's powerful because if you have them in your garden, you try to get them out, it's got that long taproot of the root because it's sucking up nutrients. But yeah, alfalfa, super powerful. I mean, 60 to 80 feet into the ground, that's nuts. So it's very alkalizing to the body. It's high in chlorophyll, very high in vitamins and minerals. Some people can call it even like a whole multivitamin, nature's multivitamin. Very high in protein as well. Yeah, and it's very great and powerful for enhancing the endocrine gland system, especially the adrenals and the pituitary. So obviously the main two glands, alfalfa is powerful for doing that, and it's just loaded with good stuff for the whole body. So I love alfalfa. They feed it to horses to bulk them up, to put muscle on them. Some people, when I used to get over from eating a predominantly meat-based diet, switching to a plant-based diet, I had to prove to myself that I can grow muscle and I could be strong and I could, I'm an athlete, on plant foods primarily instead of meat foods, and you can actually be more powerful. But some people really fight that, and you go, okay, well, what are some of the strongest animals in creation? Horses are pretty strong. What about gorillas? Do they eat meat? No, they eat plants. And I guarantee you, a gorilla could pick me up and throw me over this building. They're so strong. I don't know the numbers, but I've heard like 10 times stronger than a human. It's just incredible. And all on plant foods. So can you build muscle on plant foods? You tell me. And you can do it a lot better than on dead, decaying flesh. So anyway, you think about it, yeah. I love meat, don't get me wrong, but but yeah, you're eating a dead, decaying piece of muscle. And then we think that's going to be more healthy for us and easier for our system than eating something that God designed in its whole food form with its enzymes and everything. So, but yeah, alfalfa, powerful for the body, strengthens the whole body. Astragalus, very good for the adrenal glands. It's probably most well known for boosting immune function. It increases the production of immune cells and white blood cells and that type of stuff. But yeah, very strong for the adrenal glands, the nervous system, and the whole endocrine gland system. It's basically another strengthener of cells in general. They call it a cellular proliferator. So in doing that, it boosts energy, it boosts the immune system, it boosts all sorts. It increases cardio output, strengthens the whole cardiovascular system. So astragalus, and usually astragalus is pretty cost-effective, pretty cheap, and so that's another reason I love astragalus. It tastes good too. Sometimes I can just get straight scoop of astragalus and put it in my mouth, and yeah, not a lot of herbs you can do that with and stand it, but astragalus actually tastes good. Just a side note. If anybody wants to play around with that, you let me know. Black walnut hull. So I talked about this in like our cleansing class because black walnut hull probably most well known for its ability to kill microorganisms, kill parasites. Again, it's a hull of the nut, so it's protecting the nut. It's got specific compounds in it to help kill the bad guys, but it doesn't affect our good stuff in our body, our good bacteria. It only kills the bad stuff, but it's also considered a cellular proliferator. That's the cool thing about, I say it in every class, but pharmaceuticals and drugs, man-made stuff, they have all these side effects. Yeah, it may do this one thing, but then it's going to have 1,000 side effects. But herbs, things that God created, have side benefits. So you might take it to kill a parasite, but then it's going to strengthen your cells. So it's crazy that it could kill bad stuff in your body, but then it's going to strengthen your own body and in the process bring more oxygenation. But also it's very high in minerals and specifically iodine. So that's why it's on this list. It's very detoxing to like the thyroid and the whole body and for parasites and the like. But iodine is very needed for the thyroid, and I didn't get into it in talking about the thyroid, but you have to have iodine for your body to produce, for your thyroid to produce its thyroid hormone, thyroxine or something. So again, people are taking synthetic thyroid medication, but if you give your body the right stuff, it'll produce enough of it on its own. So yeah, very rich in iodine as well as a bunch of other minerals. So it's very strengthening to the immune system, the lymph, bowel movement, strengthens the bones. A great herb because it does so many different things. Deer antler, it's probably one of my more favorite things too, because again, it does so many things as well. It's crazy. The deer and anything with antlers, they grow these big antlers every year and then they fall off and they grow them again. It's the equivalent of us like growing a new femur every year. I mean, imagine, yeah, it's crazy. And sometimes they grow up to 2 centimeters a day. Wow. So there's crazy stuff going on, and the Chinese have known this for thousands of years. There's some of the people that know the most about this. They said, man, if there's something in that antler causing it to grow that fast, I want that, and I want to put it in my body, and maybe that'll help me grow that fast. It's not going to make you grow an antler, but yeah, darn. If that's what you're going for, sorry to break it to you. But but it has these, so scientists, again, Chinese have been taking and using this for thousands of years. You go back, they have literature about it 4,000 and 5,000 years ago about how they're using it, and they just know that you take this thing and it helps your body, it strengthens you, it helps you regenerate, all this stuff. So they didn't always know why. So it's cool that scientists have now studied it and confirmed all these different things in it. And I'm not a detail guy, and you can look it up, but there's all these growth factors and different enzymes and all this awesome stuff in there that if you take it, it's not giving you something synthetic. It's out of nature. It allows your body to produce more of things it needs to regenerate, to rebuild, to revitalize, to just all this crazy stuff. So there's like there's a book we have in here somewhere. It's like 15 pages of all the things that deer antler does, and it doesn't even talk about, because it doesn't have a specific function necessarily, but it's going to cause everything to work better, and it's going to help things repair way quicker. But it's especially good for the endocrine glands, good for the nervous system. I've heard people use, along with detoxing and alkalizing and other things, using deer antler for like the regeneration of nerves. Doctors will tell you nerves can't regenerate, or at least they used to. Maybe I think they're talking about it now, that, they can actually regenerate. And how to do that, and they're doing stem cells and all this. But the body will do it itself. It's just a slower process than a muscle. A muscle has a large blood supply, and a nerve and a joint and a connective tissue is just a little bit slower to do it, but it'll do it. And you give it stuff like deer antler, people that have been paraplegics and severed spines and stuff for decades have gotten function back. So yeah, that's the response I had. Hearing about and seeing videos of stories of a guy that, and several people that, a police officer that got injured and didn't have any function, period, from the neck down, all of a sudden get regeneration back. And another lady who had minimal use of her hands but was paralyzed from the waist down, and again got function back. And they have a lot of issues, and it takes a long time because of your decades of no movement, and there's a little bit more that goes into that. But the body can do it. God can do it, and He gives us certain tools to do it. And but also I'm all for the supernatural stuff too, and I love praying and believing that God can, and He does heal supernaturally. But I think He wants us to understand how He created us and to partner with Him in that, because we don't just treat our bodies like crap and then go to Him every month saying, hey, heal me. I think eventually, and maybe that's a key to why He doesn't always heal. I don't know, I'm not God. But a big part of it is us partnering with Him and being wise on how He created our bodies, partnering with Him and using the cool things He gave us. So anyway, deer antler, awesome stuff. Happens to be a little bit more pricey than some of the other herbs because it's a natural thing. They can only get it certain times of the year. There's only a certain amount of it. So yeah, don't ever look for synthetic deer antler. Or there's companies out there, again, you want a high quality. There's companies that are trying to say they're using deer antler, and it's not truly deer antler. So Eleuthero, also known as Siberian ginseng. The Russians basically discovered it up in their area in Siberia. And they found it has a lot of the same benefits as ginseng. And I'll talk about ginseng in a little bit, but Siberian ginseng is generally less expensive, alternative to Panax ginseng, the most well-known one, but one of the greatest herbs for endocrine glands and function. So it's especially good for the adrenal glands and boosting function, and it also helps increase function of the pancreas. And it's just a general, I talked about it in my class for athletes because it's just so powerful of an adaptogenic herb. It helps your body adapt to stress, mental, physical, emotional stress. So athletes, the Russians were taking this in high amounts they started taking it back in the 60s or 70s, and they attributed that as one of the things that really helped them dominate the Olympics. For a while they were dominating the Olympics because they figured out this key to extra nutrition and adaptogenic herbs, and there's a scientist out there that coined the adaptogenic herb concept, and all these herbs that they were using, Siberian ginseng and rhodiola and blah, 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 a couple other ones, but they were using that on top of training really hard, and so their guys were able to train harder and longer and recovering quicker, and but it does the same thing in other areas of life. So if you're stressed, it helps you deal with stress better. If you're mentally overwhelmed, it helps your body adapt. But yeah, very powerful for the endocrine glands. Faux tea. Has anybody heard of faux tea? It's also called He Shou Wu. It's not as well known in the United States for some reason, but it's one of the most important herbs to the Chinese, considered like a longevity herb. It's a rejuvenator. So this is one of like their key ones that they just give people all the time. And the Chinese are big on herbs, but to increase longevity and youthfulness and just keeping the body functioning properly. But yeah, it is a powerful rejuvenator of the endocrine glands, which in turn, of course, strengthens the whole body. It's considered an adaptogen also, in that it helps your body adapt to these things. And if there's too much stress on a certain gland or organ, it helps boost function. It doesn't ever, adaptogens are cool because it doesn't, again, force a specific action, but it balances. So you could actually they've done studies where if you're too high on something, it'll lower it. If you're too low on something, it'll higher it. So again, how do I explain that? I don't know. The intelligence of God in foods. That's the only way to explain it. Panax ginseng. This is probably the most studied herb in history. And a lot of people know about ginseng. And so specifically the Panax Chinese ginseng is known to be some of the strongest ginseng. I mean, there's American ginseng, there's Korean ginseng, there's white, red, all this crazy stuff. But in general, the Panax species of ginseng is supposed to be the most powerful. And it's considered a very powerful adaptogenic herb. So they always talk about the ginseng root. When you pull it out, it kind of looks like a mini human, the way it's shaped, like the way it's got these 2 branches of legs and 2 branches of arms. And so they use it to strengthen the whole body. There's a guy I heard about that I don't remember how old he ended up living, but I think he died 50 or 60 years ago. This Chinese guy that lived to really old, like 150 plus, older than that. And he said, one of the things he said is I drank ginseng tea every day. And I ate, this was another key one, which I'm not going to get into too much, but I'll just throw it out there. He said, I try to eat things as high above the ground as I can, never eat something that comes from underneath the ground. Just throwing that out there. But generally the more stuff that comes in the ground is more starchy, more this and that. So nuts, fruits, vegetables are all grown above the ground. So just throwing it out there. Not to say that eating stuff from in the ground, I mean, there's a lot of good things you can get out of the ground, but that's just what he said. And he lived to be 150, 180, something crazy like that. But Panax ginseng is, again, in the Chinese, they give it to people, just take a little bit of it every day. That's their philosophy. But you can take high amounts of it and have really powerful effects on energy levels, endocrine gland function, adrenals. Yeah, it's considered a kind of a stimulant. It's not like a caffeine stimulant, but it's a energizer because of all the effects that it has on the whole body to just rejuvenate. So of course it increases mental function, physical function. Athletes are big into taking it, all that stuff. So juniper berry. Most people maybe know of juniper berry for its effect on the kidneys, and it's cleansing, rejuvenating the kidneys, but it's also very, very powerful for restoring pancreas function. So pancreas, again, the main two things for producing insulin and then producing enzymes to break down food, pancreatic enzymes. So somebody that is having issues with insulin and high blood sugar, and at the same time having a hard time digesting food, seeing undigested bits of food in their stools, you got a weak pancreas. So this is something powerful that you can take that helps with that, and especially beneficial, of course, in the case of diabetes. It has natural insulin properties to it, but yeah, of course, I'm not going to get into all this stuff with kidneys like I did before, but for UTIs and for all kidney stuff, it's very good for. So kelp. Kelp is a sea vegetable and very, very potent on nutrients, especially minerals. But again, one of the ones that is really high in iodine. I think it's the most high in iodine content food there is, and so it's the major supplement used to help the adrenal or help the thyroid. But on top of iodine, it has tons of other minerals and vitamins, and but yeah, very, very important. Of course, we need iodine for efficient thyroid function, but also pituitary too needs some iodine. That's what I mean. Licorice. Licorice is a very powerful herb for the adrenal glands specifically, but it does help out all the endocrine glands. It helps bring balance to cortisol levels. You know, if you're too high or too low in cortisol, that can affect your stress, anxiety, all that. Licorice can have a little bit of an effect to boost blood pressure too. So the only caution I would give people, and I've heard, is if somebody already has really high blood pressure, you might use other ones first before you use licorice, but it is very powerful for the adrenal glands. Does a ton of awesome stuff. It's a really powerful herb. It can be used all the time. So it really powerful for arthritis and stuff too. I think because of its adrenal gland function, it would kind of make sense. Again, the adrenals produce corticosteroids, which help put out the fire, put out the inflammation. So if you have inflammation in the joints, wherever it is, it's going to help buffer that. It's going to help remove those if you're eating the right things too. Maca. I love maca. I learned about it years ago when I was looking for extra things to help me athletically. And a lot of athletes are starting to know about maca and all the awesome things it does. It has a good amount of protein. It's high in B vitamins, which a lot of, sometimes it's hard to find plant foods that are high in B vitamins, although your gut bacteria will produce B vitamins on their own if you're giving them the right things. But yeah, and it's very powerful for the endocrine glands and for normalizing, balancing hormone levels. So men that are too low in testosterone, it'll boost. If you're too high in testosterone, it'll lower. And same thing with women. If you're too high or low in estrogen, it'll balance. It won't force something, but it will bring balance to the endocrine glands and normalize hormone levels. So it's known as being anabolic, in that it helps the body build muscle. So it's good for athletes, good for bodybuilders, but just good for anybody too. I mean, it's not going to put on muscle on if you eat it, but if you're working out, it helps. It helps. Yeah, it will help increase that. Nettles, also known as stinging nettles. If you ever come across this outside fresh, you can touch it. If you brush up against it, it can actually, it's got these little tiny spines on it, and they'll get in you, and it'll hurt, it'll itch, you'll feel a little stinging. But once you dry it out and you use it as a tea, that part of it goes away and doesn't affect you. But nettles are really powerful because they're really nutritive. They have a lot of nutrition in them. People particularly take them, and it is known for helping with allergies. A lot of people take them for allergies because of the, I guess I don't know specifically why, but all the nutrients it has in it, but it's really powerful for allergies. One of the most well-known herbs to help with allergies and hay fever, but it's also one of the few herbs that really helps rejuvenate and boost thyroid function. I mean, there's the herbs that have high in iodine, but this is one that's really powerful for rejuvenating, renewing the thyroid gland specifically, but very alkalizing. I mean, gosh, some people say that this is like a staple tea to have every day because of all the good things it does. Nutrition, alkalizing, bringing balance to the body. Parsley, I joked in one of the classes how I used to just think parsley was just a decoration, but it's a food you can eat, and it's always on the side of my plate, and I'm like, what is that? Why would anybody eat that? I'd rather eat my steak, you know? But parsley is really good for you. I put it in a lot of my juices, my green juices, and I love it. I mean, by itself it's kind of potent, but you balance it with some apple and lemon and other things, and it's really good for you. It's a tremendous herb for the urinary tract and the adrenal glands. It's great for all of the endocrine glands. It increases the iron carrying capacity of the blood. It's very high in chlorophyll. It helps cleanse the blood, cleanse the lymphatic system, cleanse of heavy metals and toxicity. So again, if you're really trying to detox and you're doing the green juices, it's a great fresh herb to get and put in your juices. Same with like cilantro, and I like to throw mint in there sometimes for the flavor. But mint's really good for you. And arugula, another really potent herb but these are all very powerful detoxes, especially when you juice them and they're in concentrated form. They can really do some good work. But you can eat it too, and you can throw a little bit in a salad. I'll throw a little bit of cilantro, a little bit of parsley in there, just a little mixed in with the other stuff. Rhodiola, another awesome herb that I like, very powerful adaptogenic herb. But another one that's powerful for the endocrine glands and especially the adrenals. The Vikings historically were known for taking rhodiola a lot. They called it golden root, and they took it all the time and attributed them being able to be these fierce warriors and get extra energy and climb the mountains and all that stuff, because it does increase red blood cell count. It does increase oxygenation of the body, and it affects a lot of things like mentally too. So it lowers levels of stress hormones and certain degradation of certain hormones that affect the brain, serotonin, dopamine, different things that deal with stress and mood. And so a lot of that depression and brain fog and mood and anxiety, again, a lot of that's tied to the adrenal glands, which is why this is really important. But it does specifically help like lower those amounts in the bloodstream and stuff too. Rhodiola is a key herb for athletes and people wanting more energy, more focus, and more brain function too. So royal jelly. Who knows what royal jelly is? You do. A couple people. You do. Wow. Okay. So royal jelly, it's fascinating to learn about the things that the bees create. They're fascinating little things. Royal jelly is another thing. I mean, I've talked about bee pollen, and I'm a big fan of bee pollen. It's loaded with nutrition, one of the most nutritionally dense things on the planet, bee pollen. So the bees go and collect the pollen. They feed the pollen to the baby bees. But it's like everything, all you need in one. It's incredible stuff. But one of the other most incredible things they make is royal jelly. And they feed this royal jelly. It's only made by certain bees, and they give it to the queen bee. And the queen bee lives like years longer than, I don't know if it's years, I probably have it in here somewhere, but yeah, can live up to 7 years, whereas a normal worker bee only lives up to 7 weeks. So, and that's the only thing the queen bee eats is royal jelly. And also she produces like, I don't know the number, but thousands or maybe even hundreds of thousands of eggs every day. And what's cool is if the queen bee dies, they can feed the royal jelly to any bee, is what I've heard, and it will turn into a queen bee. So really it's all attributed to this food, this royal jelly that she's eating. So it's crazy stuff. And again, some of the Chinese and some people across different places have known how powerful it is. and have taken it but not really known why. And then scientists have studied it and broken down all these crazy things. It's loaded with proteins and minerals and precursors to hormones and collagen and amino acids and lecithin and B vitamins and all this crazy stuff. And so, but it's very, all the B vitamins, it's really loaded in B vitamins, are very nourishing to the adrenals, very nourishing to the whole body, but especially the endocrine glands and the adrenals. And another side note is, like I said, it makes this queen bee produce just crazy reproductively, thousands and hundreds of thousands of eggs. And so a lot of times it will help people, again, the testes and the ovaries are reproductive organs and they're endocrine glands, but it will help boost their function and bring back people that are infertile. It will help people be fertile again, because it's got powerful effects for doing that. But yeah, royal jelly, powerful stuff. Saw palmetto berry. It's most traditionally known as the male herb for helping with prostate function, and its anti-inflammatory effects on the prostate, which again we talked about, men that get prostate issues. So saw palmetto is very good for that, but it's just a great herb for the whole endocrine glands, thyroid, adrenal, pancreas, pituitary. Helps increase urine flow and kidney function. But yeah, good for the adrenals, good for all that. Aids the pancreas and sugar metabolism. Another great herb. Schizandra, another adaptogenic herb that I think they call it the 5 or the 7 flavor berry, because it's like sweet, it's tart, it's sour, it's all this stuff, but it's really loaded with dense nutrition. Any of those dark berries usually have a lot of nutrition to them. But yeah, an adaptogenic herb that people have used for a long time to help bring balance back to the body. So especially good for athletes, but again, it's mainly because of its effect on the endocrine gland system. And the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, again, tied to some of the adrenal function and all of that. So yeah, another great herb, and it tastes kind of interesting. You guys should try a little bit sometime just to get the different tastes, and it's quite interesting. It's not like any other berry I've ever had. And that's it on the herbs. I mean, again, there's so many more I could include in there, and I'm going to get into more herbs specifically for like men and women in those classes upcoming, but these are some of the top just herbs for all around for the endocrine glands, and specifically for thyroid and adrenals I talked a lot about. But I mean, gosh, you can go into tons of different stuff that I've talked about before with pine pollen and Tongkat Ali and just a bunch of stuff, but more on the men and women herbs coming up in a few classes. So I think next week is immune system, so we'll be breaking that down more in depth. But yeah, what you guys have any questions for me? Yes.
You have tremors listed as a sign of adrenal weakness. Do you think that's always the case, or do you know of other things that cause tremors?
So you're asking about tremors, and I had that listed as adrenal weakness potentially, and do I know of other stuff?
Like like I have hand tremors, have had them since I was a teenager.
Is that necessarily specifically related to adrenals?
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's a high chance that they're correlated. There may be some other stuff going on. I don't know the full answer to that question, but obviously there's something going on with the nervous system, and the adrenals, again, produce neurotransmitters, which can affect your body's communication with the nervous system and telling your body what to do, which can cause tremors. So I would definitely work on the adrenals, see what that does, because that's definitely going to be involved for sure. Is that the only thing going on? I don't know, but again, you detox, you alkalize, there could be toxicity, there could be other stuff involved. So yeah. Any other questions?
If you had to pick, let's say you could only pick one of these herbs to take, would you have a preference, like would alfalfa be over deer antler, or would you take deer antler over alfalfa? I mean, in other words,
Oh man. Yeah, so the question is for the camera, if I had to pick one herb, what would it be? You would ask me a hard question like that.
sorry.
Out of the thousands of herbs, you can only choose one. It's hard to choose one, but if I had to choose one, maybe it's deer antler. Just because it's the most powerful in one single source. But, I mean, gosh, alfalfa's wonderful and fairly cost effective. Astragalus is wonderful and very cost effective. Eleuthero is powerful and very cost effective. But yeah, I mean, like some of the more potent ones are going to be the deer antler, Panax ginseng, royal jelly. Those are going to be the more potent ones, probably. But they're all good, and so you got to balance and figure out what's right for you. And you can get into, like I've talked about in the past, different ways of taking it. You can get powdered form, you can get tea form, you can get concentrated liquid tincture, and the powders will usually be the most cost effective, but not as concentrated. You get a tincture, a little bit more expensive, but more concentrated, more utilizable. Yeah, so it's hard to know what to take, but yeah, you can start with one thing. And a lot of times what I like to do for endocrine glands is formulas, because it mixes a bunch of them.
Do they make formulas?
We used to carry an endocrine gland formula, and if we don't still have one, we're going to be bringing one in. I know specifically from a company that I'm sourcing and bringing in that has the highest quality stuff. And they have an endocrine gland formula specifically, but an adrenal formula is going to have most of the herbs that are good for all the endocrine glands.
So you would suggest that would probably be the most cost effective, is getting a formula with several of them maybe in a pill or whatever.
Maybe, yeah. You're saying getting a formula might be the most cost effective. For getting the biggest effect, maybe, because you're getting a blend that's working synergistically, and you can get a whole formula for whatever, $20 and yeah, so that could be very powerful. But I like to throw powdered herbs in smoothies all the time and just add additional stuff. But I do take some liquid tinctures too to get some extra added emphasis in specific areas that I'm wanting to target. So 1 month it might be adrenals, 1 month it might be something else. And you can take multiple formulas. I think you asked this another time. You can take multiple formulas all at once, and the herbs don't interact like medicines do. They actually work together. So that's why I like formulas too. Any other questions? That it? All right, thanks guys.